My husband cheated with 4 women while I was pregnant. So at our baby shower, I read their names out loud one by one as baby name suggestions and watched the color drain from his face one name at a time. I was 6 months pregnant when I found out. My husband, Nico, left his car unlocked in the driveway, and I went out to grab the reusable bags from the back seat. There was a receipt on the passenger seat from a restaurant I had never been to. Dinner for 2 on a Thursday night, 3 weeks earlier. I was home that Thursday. Nico told me he was working late. $86 and 2 glasses of wine. I don't drink wine. I was pregnant. I put the receipt back and went inside and didn't say a word. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to things I had been too tired and too pregnant to notice. Nico's best friend, Corey, was married to a woman named Bridget, who I was close with. 2 weeks before my baby shower, Bridget sat across from me at our diner and told me she needed to tell me something. She said Corey told her Nico had been seeing someone, a woman named Valerie who worked at a gym near his office. Then she said it wasn't just Valerie. Corey had let it slip after a few drinks that there had been others. A woman named Chris from Nico's college alumni group, a woman named Sutton from an app he was still using, and Dana, the same Dana whose perfume I smelled on his neck while I was carrying his child. 4 women. 4 women while I was growing a human inside my body and going to every appointment alone because Nico said his schedule was too packed. I sat across from Bridget and told her I was grateful. Then I went home and I started planning. The baby shower was at our house. About 25 people. Nico's parents, my parents, Bridget and Corey, Nico's sister Fern, our neighbors, friends from our birthing class. We hadn't picked a name yet. Nico and I had been going back and forth for months. We told everyone we'd announce it at the shower. That was true. I just moved up the decision process. The shower was on a Saturday afternoon. Bridget helped me set up that morning and she kept looking at me like she was waiting for me to fall apart. I didn't. Nico was in a great mood, performing the role of excited father in front of an audience, and he was good at it. After the gifts and the food, I stood up in the living room and told everyone Nico and I had been struggling to pick a name, so I thought we'd narrow it down together right here. Everyone clapped. Nico smiled and put his hand on my back. I told the room I had a few names I really loved, and I wanted Nico to give me his honest reaction to each one. He said, "Let's hear them." I looked right at him and said, "What do you think about Dana?" Nico's hand dropped off my back so fast I felt the air move. He recovered quickly and said it was a nice name, not his favorite. I nodded. Then I said, "What about Valerie?" Nico blinked. He looked at me for half a second longer than normal and said that one didn't feel right either. I said, "Okay, how about Chris?" He didn't answer right away. He shifted his weight. His jaw tightened. He said he wasn't sure about that one. The room was still cheerful because nobody else knew what they were hearing. Then I said, "I have one more. What about Sutton?" Nico's face drained. He stood completely still and looked at me, and I looked right back at him without blinking. He knew I knew. He knew I had just said every single name in front of both our families and all of our friends. Nico told me we should talk in the other room. I told him I was comfortable right here. I looked at the room and I said, "Her name is going to be Josephine, after my grandmother." A few people smiled. Someone near the back said it was a beautiful name. Nico's shoulders dropped a little, like maybe he thought I was done, like maybe we'd all eat cake and pretend the last 5 minutes didn't happen. I wasn't done. I held the baby name card in my hand and I said, "Those 4 names I just read, those aren't baby names. Those are the names of the women my husband has been sleeping with since I got pregnant." The room went so quiet I could hear the ice settling in the punch bowl. Nobody moved. I watched my words land on every face one by one. Confusion, then shock, then the slow turn of every head toward Nico. And Nico didn't miss a beat. He let out a little laugh, the kind you do when someone says something so crazy you can't believe it. And he said, "She's confused. This is stress. She doesn't know what she's saying." He looked around the room like he felt sorry for me, like I was some fragile pregnant woman losing her grip and everyone should be worried about me, not angry at him. I almost admired how fast he switched into that mode. Almost. I reached into the baby name card and pulled out the first paper Bridget helped me print, a screenshot of a text exchange between Nico and Valerie, his name at the top, her name at the top, a Thursday night in October. I held it up so the people closest could see and I read the date out loud. Then I said, "This is from the night he told me he was working late. He was at dinner with her. That $86 receipt and 2 glasses of wine, same night, same woman." Nico stiffened next to me. He didn't reach for the paper. He just stood there like the floor had turned into something he couldn't trust anymore. That's when Antoinette stood up. Nico's mother pushed herself off the love seat with both hands on the armrest, and her face was tight and controlled, and she said, "This is not the place for this. You are embarrassing yourself and my son." She said it loud, the way you correct a child at a dinner party, like I was the problem. I kept my voice steady. "Your son embarrassed me every single night he didn't come home. I'm just making sure everyone hears about it at the same time so he can't tell 25 different lies to 25 different people." Her lips pressed together so tight they almost disappeared. Then she sat back down. Eugene hadn't moved. Nico's father was in the chair by the bookshelf, completely still, just looking at his son. Not angry, not sad. Like he was trying to figure out if the person standing in front of him was the son he thought he raised or someone he didn't know at all. That look was worse than anything Antoinette said. Then Bridget stood up. Her voice was shaking, but she said it anyway. "It's true. Corey told me everything. Nico was seeing 4 women. Corey begged him to stop and Nico told him to stay out of it. Corey was sitting in the corner with his head in his hands. He didn't look up. Nico turned to him and I watched the panic on his face change into fury. His jaw locked. He looked at Corey like Corey had just done the worst thing anyone had ever done to him. Nico cheated on his pregnant wife with 4 women, and the person he was mad at was his best friend for not keeping the secret. Then my mom moved. Violet stood up, walked across the living room, and came and stood right next to me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what it meant. Then my dad spoke. Ahmed looked at Nico from across the room, and his voice was low and calm, and that was scarier than yelling. "You have 30 seconds to tell the truth, or I promise you I will never let you near my daughter or my grandchild again." The baby shower was over, but Nico wasn't done. He turned his whole body toward Corey, and his voice came out sharp and aimed like a weapon. "This is what you did? You told your wife private things I said to you as my best friend, and she twisted them into this? You ruined my family." He said it like Corey was the villain. Corey opened his mouth, but nothing came out. A few people in the room shifted. I could feel that little ripple of doubt. Antoinette jumped on it. She stood up again. "You should be ashamed," she said to Bridget, "coming into this house and helping her plan this ambush. What kind of friend does that?" that? Bridget's face went red, but Bridget didn't fold. She looked at Antoinette and said, the kind of friend who doesn't let a pregnant woman get lied to by the man who's supposed to protect her. Antoinette turned away from her like Bridget was beneath her attention. Then Nico changed again. His voice dropped to that low, gentle tone I used to find comforting, and now made my skin crawl. Can we please just go talk? You're stressed. The baby. Think about the baby. We can figure this out, but not like this. He reached his hand out toward me, palm up, like he was being reasonable, like he was the one trying to hold things together while I was the one tearing them apart. I felt the room respond, a few small nods. A neighbor near the hallway whispered about giving us privacy. The room was tilting. People don't want to sit in a room where a marriage is falling apart in front of them. They want it to stop. Nico knew that. He was betting the room's discomfort would do what he couldn't do himself. I looked at him and I said, don't you dare use our daughter to get out of this. You didn't think about her when you were with Valerie. You didn't think about her when you were on that app talking to Sutton. You don't get to use her as a shield now. My voice didn't crack. My hands didn't shake, but I could feel the room slipping. Nico's family was pulling together around him like they always did. I needed something undeniable. I looked at Bridget. She was already looking at me. We had planned for this exact moment. I nodded. She nodded back. Bridget reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. I have a voicemail from Corey. He left it on my phone weeks ago. It's his voice. He says exactly what Nico did and who he did it with. Nico's eyes locked onto that phone like it was a gun. A voicemail wasn't something he could spin. She pressed play. Corey's voice came out of that phone speaker and filled the entire living room. The kind of voice someone has at 2 in the morning when they can't sleep and they need to get something off their chest. Bridge, I can't keep covering for Nico anymore. He's been seeing this woman Valerie, the one from the gym near his office. And there's another one, Chris, from his college alumni thing. I told him to end it. He promised me he would. And then instead of ending it, he got on some app and started talking to another woman named Sutton. He's out of control. I don't know how to be his friend and keep this from you at the same time. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. The voicemail lasted maybe 40 seconds. Nobody breathed while it played. Every single pair of eyes in that living room moved to Nico. He stood there with his face completely white, like every drop of blood had drained out of him. He looked at Corey and his voice was barely above a whisper. You recorded that? Corey lifted his head all the way up. I left that voicemail for my wife because I couldn't sleep. I didn't record anything. I called her because I was sick of carrying your lies. It was so simple, so honest. Nico took a step toward him. You were supposed to be my best friend. Corey stood up from that folding chair. He got right to his feet and looked Nico in the face. I was. That's why I told you to stop. You didn't listen. The room was so quiet I could hear the fridge humming in the next room. That's when Eugene stood up. He looked at his son and he said, is this true? All of it? Nico looked at his father and he hesitated. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just stood there with his mouth half open, and that half a second where he could have denied it and didn't. That was the answer. Eugene said, sit down and stop performing. 3 words that hit harder than anything I had said all day. Nico actually flinched. Antoinette grabbed Nico's arm. He doesn't have to answer this in front of everyone. Eugene turned to her and his face was calm and set. Yes, he does, because if he doesn't, she will, and she has every right to. Antoinette's hand dropped off Nico's arm. She looked at Eugene like she didn't recognize him. Like in 30-something years of marriage, he had never once not sided with her, and here he was, choosing the pregnant daughter-in-law over his own boy. Then Antoinette started crying. Quiet, real crying. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and looked at me. Are you happy now? You've ruined your baby's family before she's even born. My son made mistakes, but you could have handled this privately. Instead, you did this, in front of everyone. She wiped her face. Then she said the thing that hit me hardest. What kind of mother does this? It landed in the center of my chest like a rock. I was 6 months pregnant, standing in a room full of people I loved with printed screenshots in my hand and a voicemail still ringing in the air, and my husband's mother was asking me what kind of mother does this. My hands started to shake. I felt my throat tighten. Then my mom moved. Violet stepped between me and Antoinette, and her voice was low and so steady it could have held up a building. Don't you dare call my daughter a bad mother. Your son is the one who broke this family. She's the one still standing. Antoinette's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked at Violet, and then she looked away. I took a breath deep enough that I felt it in my ribs. I looked right at Antoinette. I handled it this way because your son would have lied to every single person in this room one at a time. I gave him the same courtesy he gave me. None. Antoinette didn't respond. She looked down at her hands. But Nico always had one more card. He lifted his head, and when he spoke, his voice was different. Not angry. Tired. The kind of tired that's designed to make people feel bad for you. I'm not perfect. I never said I was. But I've been trying. I've been working 60-hour weeks so my wife could stay home. I've been under pressure none of you understand. And yes, I made mistakes. But she's standing here acting like I'm a monster when all I did was fall apart for a few months. He let the word pressure do its work. He wasn't denying anything anymore. He was rewriting it, turning 4 affairs into a breakdown, turning a betrayal into a cry for help. I could see people processing it. Not buying it exactly, but processing it. Because it's easier to believe someone fell apart than to believe someone you know is just a liar. I didn't let it sit. I looked at him and I said, you weren't falling apart, Nico. You were living a double life. You told me you couldn't come to my ultrasound because of a meeting. That was the day you took Chris to lunch. I checked the calendar. I reached into the baby name card one more time. There was one more paper folded inside it. A timeline I had built with Bridget over 2 weeks. 3 columns, dates on the left, what Nico told me in the middle, what he was actually doing on the right. I unfolded it and I read 3 entries out loud. October 12th. Nico told me he had a client dinner. He was at a hotel bar with Valerie. November 3rd. Nico told me he was going to the gym after work. He was at a restaurant with Chris. November 19th. Nico told me he was helping Corey move furniture. He was at an apartment I had never heard of with Sutton. Date, lie, truth, date, lie, truth. The room was silent. A different kind of quiet than before. The quiet of people realizing it wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness or a man falling apart under pressure. It was a system. Organized. Planned. Nico had a schedule for lying to me and he followed it like a second job. Nico's face changed again. The tired act was gone. Something harder came through. Something I had only seen a few times in our marriage, usually behind closed doors when he wasn't getting what he wanted. He turned to me and his voice came out tight and sharp. You went through my things? You tracked me? What kind of wife does that? He said it like I was the one who who had done something wrong, like finding the truth was worse than him hiding it, the kind whose husband gave her a reason to. His voice got louder. This is insane. You planned this whole thing to humiliate me in front of my family. He waved his hand at the balloons, at the banner that still said baby girl over the fireplace. I looked at him. No, I planned a baby shower. You're the one who gave me 4 names to work with. I watched it land. I watched it hit him square in the chest. His mouth opened and closed and he had nothing. No comeback. No clever redirect. Because it was true. Every name I read came from him. Every lie I listed came from him. I didn't create any of this. I just stopped hiding it. Then Fern spoke. Nico's sister had been sitting near the window the whole time and her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. Nico, just stop. Nico turned to his sister and his face went blank with shock. Fern's chin was shaking but she kept going. I saw a text on your phone at Thanksgiving from someone named Dana. I didn't say anything because I thought I was wrong. She paused. Her voice got smaller. I wasn't wrong, was I? Nico didn't answer. He just stood there looking at Fern like she had reached into his chest and pulled something out. Fern's eyes filled with tears. I should have told her then. I'm sorry I didn't. Nico's face hardened. His jaw set. He looked at me with this cold, focused look I had never seen from him before. If you leave me, I will fight you for custody. Our daughter deserves a father. A few people gasped. He was using our unborn daughter as a weapon to try to keep me in line. Ahmed stepped forward. My dad came forward with his shoulders square and his face set, and he didn't say a word, but his presence said everything. He was close enough that Nico had to take a half step back. Violet put her hand on my shoulder. I looked at this man I had married, this man who was standing in our living room threatening to take my daughter away because I told the truth about what he did. And I said, our daughter deserves a father who shows up. You can barely do that for the woman carrying her. His jaw loosened. His eyes went wide for a second before he pulled himself back together. People started moving toward the door. The neighbors grabbed their bags quietly. A friend from the birthing class hugged me on her way out. Someone squeezed my hand and whispered that I was brave. One by one they left. The front door closed behind the last guest and the house went still. Me, Nico, Antoinette and Eugene, Fern, my mom and my dad, Bridget and Corey, 9 people in a room that had held 25 an hour ago. Eugene stood up from the chair by the bookshelf and walked toward his son. He stopped about 2 feet from him. I raised you better than this. You are going to sit down, stop talking, and listen to your wife. If you have any chance of being part of your daughter's life, it starts with you closing your mouth right now. Nico opened his mouth. Eugene said, I said sit down. Nico sat down on the couch like his legs gave out. Antoinette reached for Eugene's arm. He reached over and gently removed her fingers from his sleeve. Not now, Antoinette, not this time. I stood in the center of the room. I said what I had been thinking about for 2 weeks. I'm not asking for an apology. I don't want one. An apology from Nico right now would just be another performance, and I've watched enough of those. I wanted everyone in this room to hear the truth at the same time, because Nico has spent 6 months controlling what everyone knows. He told me one thing. He told Corey another. He told his family whatever made him look best. I'm done being the only one who carries the weight of what he did. Now you all carry it too. I looked at Antoinette, including you. She didn't look up. I watched her shoulders pull in. Then Nico lifted his head. His eyes were red but dry. He looked at me and his voice came out quiet. You think you won? You just blew up everything. Our daughter is going to grow up with parents who hate each other because you couldn't handle this privately. It stung. Not because he was right, but because there was just enough truth to hurt. Then Bridget spoke from the doorway. She didn't blow up anything, Nico. You did. 6 months ago. She just turned the lights on. Nico looked away. He had nothing left. I picked up the baby name card from the side table. The card was bent now. The edges soft from how many times I had held it. I held it up and I looked at the room. I looked at my parents. I looked at Fern. I looked at Eugene and Antoinette. I looked at Bridget and Corey. And then I looked at Nico. Her name is going to be Josephine, after my grandmother, a woman who raised 3 kids alone after her husband left, and never once let anyone tell her she wasn't enough. I set the card down gently. I looked at Nico one last time. He was still on the couch, hands hanging between his knees, head low, like someone who had been emptied out. You can be part of Josephine's life, but you will never be part of mine again. Not like this. He didn't answer. I walked to the front door. I reached for the handle and I opened it. The late afternoon light came in warm and golden, and I could hear birds and a car passing on the street, the world outside just going on like normal. Nico looked up from the couch. He looked at his mother and she wouldn't meet his eyes. He looked at his father and Eugene was staring at the floor with his jaw tight. He looked at Fern and she was crying, quiet tears running down her cheeks. He looked at Bridget and she looked right back at him without blinking. He looked at Corey and Corey just shook his head, barely. Nobody told me to close the door. Nobody told me to give him another chance. The room was silent and every person in it had made their choice. Nico stood up slow, like his body didn't want to cooperate, and he walked toward the door. He walked past the gift bags and the pink balloons and the banner that said baby girl. He walked past his mother and his father and his sister. He walked past Bridget and Corey, and then he walked past me. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. He stepped through the door and out onto the front step and kept walking. I closed the door behind him. The latch clicked. The house was quiet.